Hey Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Keith. How are you, Nick? I
I'm
just
doing
saw
great.
Keith's name pop up, so I just saw that. It's good to see you, Nick.
Yeah, happy to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that my two cohorts are not here today. That's Ben and GP. Uh,
They look like
definitely
fun
feeling
guys. The pictures,
yeah,
you guys all have great energy in those pictures.
yeah. Definitely feel a little naked. Ben's usually the driver and has a good way of kind of poking at me and GP and really gets the ball rolling.
That's
So,
awesome. Hopefully, I'll get
um,
to meet them one day.
yeah. Hey, introduce yourself real quick for who you are real quick, I guess, and just what you're
Sure.
about.
Sure. I'm Kim Ann Curtin, also known as the Wall Street Coach. I'm a performance coach for traders, investors, helping them really break free of self sabotage and master their mindset, master their performance. I've worked with hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, prop firms, seven, eight, nine, and even some 10-figure traders, mid and large cap executives, fintech CEOs. Done this for 18 years. It's my bliss. It's what I was born to do. And I come out of finance for 10 years before I became a coach 18 years ago. So 28 years, 29 years in the finance world. It's a long, long
Dang, right
time.
on. Where on the planet are you?
I am in Hawaii quite
That's what I thought.
unexpectedly.
Yeah,
Born in
yeah.
Brooklyn, came here 10 years ago to write my first book, Transforming Wall Street, and found myself in an outrigger canoe paddling uh, on the ocean. And I just couldn't walk away and go back to New York after that.
Yeah. Jealous. I'm like in
I'm
the
very
center of the
fortunate.
US or center of the US here, the flatlands, Minnesota, and
Wow,
I mean it's springtime. I
perfect.
do love spring, but
Oh, spring is beautiful. It's the
yeah,
best. I think
yeah,
spring everywhere in the United States mainland is like an incredible season.
yeah. Well, hey, like I said, I'm gonna give a go and kind of hammer out the spies and the cues for the guys that are tuning in, and
Okay.
then we'll transition into you, because
Okay.
I honestly just want to hear you talk. But here, let me share my screen quick.
Sure. Sure.
Let's see here. So, for those that are sitting at their desk today, I think we had some news pop, which coincidentally or not so coincidentally, kind of happened right at this measured move here. So I've got the cues up. And when I say measured move, what I'm referring to is we had this stage one or this day one rally attempt here, and with the follow through day here, and then we consolidated for however many sessions that is. You've got your A point here, B point here, your C down here, and our D point actually completed up here. So if I just wanted to measure that out, I would just oops, let's see here. I would just kind of extend that out. We actually hit it a few sessions ago, but that being said, the underlying strength in the market has been pretty unreal. It's almost as if like every gap down's been bought up, and we just continue to melt up from really back here when GP and I really thought we were going to V out. I was sort of in the camp that the COVID lows was more or less the playbook that we were going to be following. And whether or not that remains true, I guess time will tell. But I just kind of wanted to touch base on the cues, get some levels out there for the guys watching, just to let them know what I'm kind of paying attention to. We have this range here, pivot highs, gap low here. You could even argue even right across there. So this is the range that we should be watching. Um, let's see, where was my fibs? What I'm currently looking for is if weakness continues here, I'm really looking for this gap low to hold. The ideal situation to me is, again, we continue to move sideways as these moving averages start to catch up and curl, particularly the 50-day. I don't think it would be out of the question to see price continue to chop around and move sideways as that 50-day does pull up. I think once we see the 20-day kind of catch up to the bottom of this gap low, we'll really see where the underlying strength is and if we are going to continue to kind of melt higher. If you just kind of extend these moving averages up and out, you can kind of guesstimate the time that it's going to take for those moving averages to curl up or to catch up to price. And we'll go from there. So it again, back to the news that kind of hit today. I don't think that it should be too shocking or too surprising that we saw something kind of pop up around here because we are a bit extended. If you go, I can't see here. I'm gonna flop over to. Am I still? Oh, I'm not sharing. Bear with me here.
Sure.
If we take a zoom out here to the weekly, you can see a little bit more clear how hard we actually did V out of here. The neat thing was we did it in such a fashion that the long-term moving averages did start to flatline. But we didn't get the cross from the 30 and the 40, which was something I didn't want to see. I did want to see price consolidate a little bit longer right here before we blasted through, but obviously that wasn't in the cards.
Mm.
The 10-week here is the same as the 50 days. So again, just kind of waiting for the 50-day to catch up to price. Depending on your time frame, is really going to determine whether or not and how much you're taking off the table where price is currently sitting. If you were coming from a cash standpoint and getting involved on this kind of V low, a lot of us, if we were following that, the Investors Business Daily, the follow through day, we really should have been getting involved, down around here. So we're now getting the opportunity to see where the relative strength really is, especially if this weakness does continue. I guess we'll kind of see how hard it kind of hits into the end of the day. If it continues into tomorrow, I think preferably I would love to see weakness continue into tomorrow, just being that we would really work off a lot of the overbought readings, particularly the McClellan, which right now it's sitting at -70. And a -200 reading would get us an absolute gift oversold reading. I think that would coincide with price kind of pulling back into here. Let's see if I could pull up the SPYs. I did want to touch base on some of the mag names, but let me flip over to the SPY quick too. SPY looks like we're already starting to kind of pull back here into those longer term moving averages. Let's see how hard the IWM pulled in. IWM pulling in a little bit harder. The Dow the same. I'm going to flip back over to the daily here. Man, props to Ben for doing all the screen sharing.
It's tricky. Especially when you have as many screens as you do.
Yeah, trying to talk and adjust the stuff at the same time. It is a lot.
Juggling. It's a juggling of multiple balls.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think today is too much of a worry. I think it should be to have been expected. I think that for the active traders, where we're sitting at currently, we run the risk of getting chopped up a bit. And the reason I say that again is because this ABCD leg up completed. And so we've got to be thinking that we need some time to breathe, some time to digest this move higher. I wanted to touch base on Google quick because interestingly, I think Google had some, I don't know, news yesterday as well. Kim, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a backstory on Google because this might kind of lead into actually talking to you about mindset and the psychology piece to both technical analysis and trading as a whole. We were talking about Google a couple weeks ago, and what I had said was that we had this wide range bar down, massive, big volume spike. I didn't have this line drawn then. Oops. And when you see things like this, the expected or what should be anticipated is follow through in the direction of that wide range bar. And when that doesn't happen, a little flag should be going off and saying, why is that? There were two pieces that to this that I was thinking, and one was that when this happened, the indices were in an uptrend. We were seeing breakouts work and hold. And this move seemed a little overdone. So the following day, we got the gap up and it just price kind of held. And if you were getting short or selling into this pop higher and didn't get the follow through, I think that you should have been nervous. Even more so the following day when you started to you even took out that low and still couldn't get the follow through. There wasn't the volume to push this thing lower. If you were on the short side, you were fighting the trend in general because the markets were moving higher. It seems counterproductive to me to be getting involved on the short side when the trend is up. Following day, we got the gap up and then price kind of took off from there. So I didn't take this particular trade. It was just kind of a more of a talking point. Price actually took out the high of this candle, which again, kind of like if you were actively trading Google, that would have been a pretty decent entry. You didn't get the follow through even from that, which, not that pretty. It really actually hasn't been that pretty entirely. But then yesterday, I don't know what the news was, but Google reversed and sold off. And I remember seeing, I don't do this often, but I clicked on the Google ticker and was just reading the comments, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is going back to taking out the lows, going back to lows. And as I was looking at it, I'm like, God, Google it looks pretty good to me. I didn't like that the candle engulfed this prior bar, but the short-term moving averages were catching up. And, sure enough, today it absolutely kind of took off from the open, which, yeah, I don't know. Let's see here. What I was looking at after, this all kind of played out was, again, the pattern that we've been seeing play out over the last few weeks has really been this kind of inverse head and shoulders look. And the measured move on an inverse head and shoulders is from the head to the neckline. And so we have this neckline here. The way that I measure it out is I'll measure it out from where the neckline broke. A more aggressive measured move would be just directly up from the head. Again, that's maybe a preference thing. And so I'm still in the camp that Google is going back after this, this pivot point right here. Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but obviously the market is, yeah, we're still kind of holding all right, just kind of fluttering around. I thought it would be a good segue into discussing mindset because, and the reason I believe this is because again, if you're as a trader, can I flip back to, let's see. Sorry, I couldn't see your face. I wanted to flip back.
It's okay.
As a trader, if you're continually consuming the news and the fear mongering, and you're subject to that influence, it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, like we're God, why doesn't it? Let's see. Hold on one sec. Oh, there we go. Um, it's easy to think that the world's ending. Like, oh my gosh, we're gonna roll over. We're gonna roll over. We're gonna roll over. When price is telling you that's not the case. And the emotional or the psychological piece to this is that if they're not trying to scare you out of a position, they're going to try and wear you out, and vice versa. Looking at these patterns, I think that the patterns that we see in the market are very similar to the patterns that we kind of play out in life.
Mhm.
Like if I were to say I'm not where I want to be, the answer to why I'm not there probably lies in my patterns, my behavioral patterns.
Absolutely. So
So
true.
what what would you what would you say to a actually let you run with it. You talking about getting traders away from the self-sabotage because I feel like
Yeah.
that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah. I don't think traders are doing it consciously
Intentionally.
or intentionally, but I think a lot of traders perhaps are not connected to what their needs are. And if we're not connected to what our human needs are, then we're not usually good at getting those needs met. And what I see as a coach to traders is that they will strive to get those needs met in their trading. And that is when they're not trading with neutrality, but with an agenda. And the agenda is to get that need met. And,
Oh,
maybe
sure.
some of the listeners don't know what those needs are, but I can just name a few needs off the top of my head. And of course, I have a universal needs list specifically, informed by this work, by the way, which was created by Marshall Rosenberg. He's a creator of a language called nonviolent communication. I learned about human needs from him. But another place that a lot of traders might have heard about is Chris Voss, his former, he's a former FBI hostage negotiator. He calls it tactical empathy, but it is the same kind of approach as this universal needs list. And some of the needs that I see traders try to get met in the market is the need for respect, the need to be seen, the need to feel effective or have efficacy, the need for adventure, the need to have participation. Those are just a handful. There's so many more. I mean, I have this whole sheet right here. These are all human needs. And
Hmm.
when we have these needs and they aren't being met any place in our life nearly as much as we need, needs are like oxygen, then you're going to potentially grab whatever you can to try to get that need met. And so I use that metaphor of a drowning man. A drowning man in the ocean. They say lifeguards, when they train lifeguards, two lifeguards should approach a drowning man. Why? Because that first lifeguard that gets close to that person is probably going down. It's not because that drowning man is selfish or a bad person. It's because he knows if he doesn't get oxygen, he's dead. So, what I say to traders is think about these needs as your oxygen. If you become better at understanding what your basic needs are and try to at least be aware of them if they're not met as your trading day begins, then you potentially don't get kind of unconsciously in setups that aren't your strategy, uh, and aren't you trying to get that need met. Because often, most of us don't get our needs met regularly. But if we're conscious of it, we can be less tempted. And that's what I say is like first step for any trader. If you have feelings like anger, frustration, apathy, depression, uh, that is a red flag on the engine of you that needs aren't being met.
Matt.
Just like if your oil light comes on in the car, right? You got to get oil.
I don't know if you remember when I hopped on that call with you.
I do.
It blew my mind because I was thinking, back to 2020, it was a particular good year for me. And, my need for adventure was getting wildly met. I was hiking, biking all the time. And I was just letting my positions run and ride versus, I think when we talked, I was talking about how it's very easy for me to lazily start gunslinging. And yeah, the setups are there. I'm not taking poor setups or poor trades, but my capital's getting spread thin. I'm taking small positions, and rather than concentrating in my best and brightest, and while my P&L or my equity curve is moving in the direction I want it, it's not moving at the pace that I think that I'm capable of.
Yep. Yep.
And
It
I,
was it was perfect. It was
it
perfect that you spoke to that. As you started to contemplate that, it was like the pieces fell into place like a Tetris game. That's what
yeah,
happens when we start to look and without judgment, right? I think Nick, our own back and forth on X, it's the judgment most traders have about themselves when they are, I don't know if we can curse here, but I'll just say screw up. When they screw up, they have a tendency to beat themselves up. And what I'm suggesting is see if you can instead observe your behavior, even when it's costly, as neutrally as possible. Because when you feel defensive, even with your own self talk, you won't notice things quite as clearly. Your vision gets shrunk. So neutrally observe. Oh, it seems like I always do this on these days. Well, what could be happening? One of the traders that came to me during COVID actually was finding she was at least a decade in, so she was not a novice, but she said, Kim, I'm taking all this risk in my trading account and I don't know why. And we discovered she was a weekend warrior and she had not been able to do those
yeah,
outdoor adventures. And so she was trying to get her need for adventure challenge met in her trading. But again, as soon as she saw that, she was able to notice the need would rise in her in the midst of her trading day, but then not necessarily take the temptation.
yeah. I prior to finding you on Twitter, I think largely to the help of actually the Stocktwits community, I kind of adopted this belief that the market ultimately pays you what you feel you deserve, not what you actually deserve, right? Like it's probably our our birthright to be abundant and cared for and all those things, but it's whether or not we actually believe those things to be true. And so I did see my trading start to take a different path when I started telling myself like I deserve the best. I deserve the
Mm.
best. I deserve the best. I started taking better setups, better quality setups. I started managing my risk in a different way, probably in a more appropriate way. Um, because I read somewhere that discipline is the ultimate form of self love,
Mm.
the ultimate form of self respect. And God, I just, it blows my mind because you know, coupled with it really, I think it depends on, where you're I suppose where you're at, what stage you're at, and how you want to attack, yourself. I think the hardest part about trading and this path or journey, I think what, we had mentioned this is I really believe that trading is the hero's journey. It is a path to self-discovery that over time, no matter the longer that you are in this game, it will force you to look at yourself in the mirror. I suppose if pending you're looking to improve and unhappy with your current level or where you're at. And what I guess the question I had from there was for a let's say a beginning, someone just starting to delve into the markets. I think we're seeing a large influx of new market participants. I think largely because of COVID and the year that we had in 2020. Um, to the guys that are newer, what do you think like is the best starting point? Like where do you I think back and I don't I mean, for me, I think it was just the fact that I was unhappy with my P&L. I was probably tired of losing money, not knowing if I was going to ever reach a level of consistency.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
I'm going to answer that question, but I just want to say that what you said before is reminded me of Ed Secoda's quote, which is win or lose, everybody gets what they want out of the market. Some
Yeah,
people seem to like to lose, so they win by losing money.
sure. They probably so the way that I took that is, I inherently feel like I am a loser.
Yeah,
I am
exactly.
a I'm not or maybe I'm not worthy of
Yeah,
success or,
yeah.
something
Yeah,
like that.
and it was interesting too, Nick, because the word that you were using was the word deserve. And what I learned through Marshall Rosenberg's work is that he feels deserve is the most dangerous word in the English language because
Oh,
it implies that some are worthy and some are not, and that
sure.
we have to earn our worthiness. And so, what I would say if I was going to tweak that self affirmation, it would be I am enough. I
Oh,
am worthy of having success.
that hits home. I think there's probably a lot of, I'm obviously speaking to men here probably, but I think that there's a lot of us that feel like we're not enough or
Oh,
have had that.
the culture is constantly indoctrinating you guys as though you are not enough. And one of the documentaries that I recommend often to men, because obviously I work mostly with men, because they're the ones who are mostly the traders, is a documentary called The Mask, M-A-S-K, you live in, The Mask you live in. And what it talks about is how men have been set up from the very beginning with this catchphrase of be a man, where that is the most ambiguous thing you could ever say to a young boy, never mind to a grown man. And Joe Erdman, who is one of the, people who speaks in it, he says that's the most dangerous day for a little boy is when he's told to be a man because there's no context given. And of course, the culture is making men feel that most men feel like their worth is earned based on what they produce. And that is why I feel a lot of times traders get themselves so in such a dangerous situation because that feeling of I have to produce will keep them here in their trading way beyond what's healthy or even their strategy's best interest. But it's coming from this false belief that they are not enough, not doing enough, and their beingness isn't allowed. And the culture tells them it's not. So I would say it all comes down to any of the inappropriate behavior, like you said, when somebody's just starting out. What do they need to realize? They need to see that it's possible that they have a belief that they aren't enough fundamentally as a human being, and that they're going to try to finally prove that they're enough through their trading. And I would say a trader does have to, in a sense, uh, deserve to trade because you do have to school yourself, educate yourself. But your fundamental worth, if that is any way tied up in what you're doing as a trader, you are potentially in great danger.
Yeah. I can say I can definitely I can look back particularly to when I was pretty much day trading entirely. It was like, you push, you push, you push, you push, you force trades. I think it's a blessing to be in a career field where, it you we're in a
It's the
career
ultimate
field.
school. It's the
Yeah.
ultimate school of enlightenment because it is going to force you to see all the shadows that you have possibly hidden from yourself seeing. And so I always try to say to traders, they're like, the market is doing this to me. It's beating me up. It's so mean to me. It hates me. And I'm like, what if the market is doing what it's doing for you? What if it's your own personal Yoda? What if it's trying to say, wake up?
Uh,
You have been living from a place of trying to prove your worth because possibly you didn't get your needs met when you were a kid. And so you keep thinking the market is there to meet them. Instead, the market is there to show you that there's some healing that you might need to do about some old stories. So see it as it's happening for you to bring forth all these wounds or traumas or misinformation that needs to finally be addressed so you can be free to trade neutrally, to live neutrally, and not in a place of never feeling like you're enough.
when would you say then that if, you're working through those things, do you think that's gonna lead you to a place where I guess kinda what I'm asking is, or what I'm thinking is, how is that going to change your trading per se? Like, it's going to obviously affect your decision making. Um, is it do you think that it will change the way you look at charts and patterns as a whole?
It
How,
will
what
because the desperation that is even at a low grade, if there's an energy, if a trader comes into any trading day with the energy of have to, must, should,
Sure,
you are not going to see the market for what it is because you are overlaying an agenda on what should be happening, what has to happen, what
rather than what
must
is.
happen. than what it is.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
in a place of wanting it to be a certain way. And when we want things to be a certain way, we have a tendency to not see what they
It
are.
yeah, totally. Like I kind of said prior to the show, it kind of irks me. I see it all over FinTwit, this idea of, trading with ice in the veins and, being like stone cold, like emotionless or, whatever it is that they want to say. And I just like, I'm like, no, like that's not the way. That's not the way.
Besides the fact that it's not even possible. I
Yeah.
mean, human beings are emotional beings. That is actually and can be your edge. It's not the enemy. Your emotions aren't the enemy. Your emotions are actually helping you. But the problem is traders are still hijacked by their emotions unconsciously. They are coming from a place of reacting instead of recognizing, oh, I've just been triggered. And again, you have to practice that outside of your trading so that when it happens in your trading, you can begin to respond instead of just react. That
React.
takes practice. Just like when you go to the gym, you can't walk into the, and do 100 crunches. You have to work your way up there. That's why I say to traders, start early. Start early with noticing where your triggers are. Journal out your triggers. You have a whole bunch of triggers probably that have already happened before you sit at your desk ready to trade. What are they? Well, I had a fight with my wife. I didn't feel she heard me. Oh, I got cut off by a guy in traffic this morning when I dropped the kids off at school. Oh, what does that feel like? That feels like disrespect. Is it possible now you're going to look for a place to be right in your trading that day? Probably more likely than not. But if you're aware of it, you can keep yourself possibly more in check.
I it's been pointed out to me in therapy actually how unkind and unforgiving I am with myself. And coincidentally, I stopped journaling a couple of years ago. And I thought that the reason I stopped journaling was because I could go back and read the things that I said. It was like, you dumb piece of shit. Like, quit crying like a bitch. Uh, how could you miss that? Like, how could you miss that? Like, it's all tied to like, the P&L, the mistake. Like, it was all tied to the mistakes. And I was like, man, if I have to if I am gonna be able to detach myself and my identity from my P&L or from my last trade, I gotta like the way that I kind of went about it was like I'm just gonna stop journaling and I'm gonna pretend I'm gonna approach each day like the previous day didn't exist. It I think it acted as a bit of a band-aid, you know, but
Yeah.
ultimately didn't it didn't get me to, where I'm trying to go. Um,
But that monster of the mind, Nick, is something almost every trader I've met in 18 years struggles with.
yeah,
And that monster of the mind, it's not that it ever completely goes away, but it can be tamed. And one of the most, you know, often recommended books I've ever given to traders is a book called Taming Your Gremlin. I actually have it right here on my shelf. I always have it close by. This is the smallest book, but the most game changing book you guys will ever read. And it's by Rick Carson. I had Rick Carson on my podcast over a year ago. It's a very short book, but it at least allows us and believe. I've read this book 20 times and I still find new gremlins. So this isn't like, something unusual. It's just that that inner critic, inner gremlin has a tendency to overtake the microphone in our head. And we often can think that it's our voice, but it isn't our voice. It is
yeah,
this inner saboteur. And just having the distinction, if your inner voice makes you feel like garbage, guess what? It's not your inner voice, it's
yeah.
your inner critic. and it looks pretty much as disgusting as that guy.
Yeah, that hits. Hits really hard. I had just tweeted the other day, kind of something along those lines about, you're not that inner voice. And I kind of was thinking, like it could be God, it could be like your guides, or it could be a hijacked, again, yeah, like a hijacked program. But the way that I think you can figure out what or who that voice might be is kind of how you feel.
Yeah,
Like if it's the gremlin, I'm gonna feel like garbage. I'm gonna feel it in my stomach. It's gonna be like
exactly.
the feeling of like shame and guilt and those things. Where if it's quote unquote God or my highest self or guides,
Yeah.
whatever,
Yes.
like they're not like they're there for my highest good and trying to lift
Correct.
me up, not tear me
Correct.
down.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And that inner voice, I would call it the capital ego, right? It's not
yeah,
coming from having to be right. It's coming from your best, highest potential. That feels very different than this inner critic does. And noticing how you feel when you say, you got this, you can do this, you're going to feel a whole bodily sensation to hear that. But this is also important. A lot of traders are very smart. They're very intellectual. They have a tendency to be very much in their head. And so what's happened over time, which I feel is one of the, shortcomings of just this kind of place that requires intellect, is that you can disconnect yourself from your body.
yeah,
You wind up disconnecting yourself from the feeling state of who you are. Our body is working in harmony, but if we cut ourselves off from the body, cut ourselves off from the intuition, even the sense of the belly can feel things before the intellect can. And so, what I advocate to traders is learn how to feel so that it's happening anyway. But if you begin to work in sequence and in harmony and synchronicity with it, you find yourself more coming from a flow stage. High's book from many years ago called Flow. He said that flow state feels effortless. It isn't hard work. I'm not saying hard work isn't involved in getting to that, but when you are in that flow state, there are traders. You can hear the greats in all of Jack Schwager's books. He talks about they are in a flow state where they are just knowing, they are feeling, they are sensing. Even Soros talks about certain physical things happening in his body that told him what he needed to do with his market decisions. This is something that's available to every trader. A couple of books I want to speak to on that is The Hour Between Dog and Wolf. That's by Dr. John Coates. He was a derivatives trader at Goldman, and then he became a neuroscientist. And he was fascinated at how he himself, as a trader, and all his colleagues were
yeah,
hijacked by their emotions during bull markets, bear markets. So he got fascinated, went down the neuroscience route, and he talks at length. And that's part of why have traders go get their lab works done, because there is a whole bunch of physiology that is informing a trader's trades that they sometimes aren't paying attention to. In Coates' books and studies, he was able to prove that if testosterone levels weren't at a certain place, a trader would not be profitable. And unfortunately, right now, there's a cohort of 30-year-olds, 35, that have the lowest T levels they've ever seen. They don't even know what's causing this. But
yeah.
there are things happening with your body. Your body's not the enemy. You have to be partnered with it. It works with you. But if you ignore it, it will potentially unknowingly stop you from that consistency and from what is going to be decades. If you want to be here for more than a couple of years, you're going to need to work in harmony with your whole system. and not treat your body and your feelings like it's the enemy. They are just
Yeah.
tools. They're just tools.
Yeah. I again, kind of going back to, like, as a boy or as kids, I think a lot of boys, men in particular, boys, you know, anger isn't okay. It's
That's the
okay to be
only
angry
one.
or
That's the
pissed.
only one you guys are allowed to have.
Yeah, so then, you start to have these other feelings and you feel inherently bad about it or wrong for having them.
Shamed.
Um,
Let's call it what it is. You guys are shamed if you have any feeling outside of anger.
yeah,
You are made to feel like you're not a man. So let's just look at what are the basic feelings that any human being has, men included, when needs are not fulfilled: irritation, discouraged, reluctant, hopeless, overwhelmed, annoyed, puzzled, impatient, confused, nervous, embarrassed, uncomfortable. Those are feelings that are happening every day for traders, and they then feel ashamed for having them.
yeah,
That is a vicious cycle. The only reason those feelings are showing up is because your basic needs aren't getting met, or they aren't getting met enough. And not just in your trading, but in life. It's hard to get needs met in this world if you aren't even fluent in what your basic needs are.
are. I'd argue that none of us are really special or even unique even in feeling. So if if I'm feeling a certain way, uh, I believe that it's very likely that the collective is feeling that way as well, and it's showing up
Mm.
in the way that the market's behaving.
Yep.
I have gotten I mentioned this. Despair has been the one flag that I have been able to absolutely like. I don't know how I got to it, but I've got kids. I don't really want to go back to day trading full time because I don't want to be at my I don't if I want the freedom to go to a Twins game with my kids, I want to be able to go to
Yeah.
the game. I don't want to have to be glued to my computer, my screens.
Yeah.
I don't really like trading to the short side because I find it very difficult. The bear market rallies like rip and I just find it difficult to hold. So when the market rolls, I can feel the despair, like, when it hits a certain point, and I feel that despair, and it's crazy how on point it is with, at the very least, an interim bottom, like an interim, kind of like max pain point. Again, like I had said earlier, whether or not that bottom is sustainable or holds, that, is to be determined, but it's I just don't think that we're unique, if we're tied to the news, we're tied to social media, we're all consuming a lot of this information, and I think it's actually even, to your point earlier, the market isn't happening to us, it's happening for us. It's the same thing with the news and all the stuff happening. It's happening for your awakening, not to you. If if I log on to CNBC and I can definitively say that there's an ulterior motive or an agenda for every single person on there, what they're saying, what they're spewing out, then I know that we're. I, where
I
was I
would
going to go
say,
with that?
man, I
Like
would
it's.
say that every person, their agenda is to get their needs met.
Oh yeah.
From
Oh yeah. That's
2 year olds to political leaders, everything that drives every human being, all of humanity, is to secure their needs. And so when we really get that, the world looks very different, because now we realize, oh, that person must really need to feel respect. That person really must need security. That person must really need affection. or community or spontaneity or a sense of freedom. It becomes like makes sense. There's a high cost often that people pay themselves or make each other pay when they're not getting their needs met. But it begins to change how, at least I have started to see negative consequences out there. I'm like, oh, yeah, that was a person who was just trying to get a need met, but they did it in the most costly way because they didn't know any other
Sure.
way to get it met.
Yeah.
So I say, get in tune with your own needs. If despair is happening for you personally, that means that there's a collection of needs, possibly some really important ones for you, that haven't been met. And once we become fluent in what our needs are, the non negotiable ones, we can become a better steward of making requests to ourselves, to our friends, family, colleagues. Hey, I'm just not really feeling great today because I've tried to tell a friend about a story and he really wasn't listening. Can I tell you that story? And would you be willing to listen to me?
Yeah.
Would you be willing is the most powerful phrase I have ever learned because it gives people choice. So maybe your wife wants to bitch after a hard day with the kids, and you say, would you be willing to give me 15 minutes before I listen? Because I need to
Yeah.
take a break. So, would you be willing, is what we can ask ourselves and one another to get our needs met, because we can't fulfill our own needs by ourselves. We can get some of them met, but
Sure.
we need connection. We need each other to help us get our needs met.
In the idea of not being enough, wouldn't you say that that is a hole that you do need to self-fill? Or
I do feel that it is a combination. Knowing you're enough, yes, is an inside job, but we do need to have connection to other human beings that do see us. We need to be seen. And if we grew up in a household where, not to make even any of our parents wrong, but if they didn't get their needs met, they weren't going to be really capable of meeting ours.
oh,
So
absolutely.
I think we do need to put ourselves, we get wounded in community and we get healed in community. So,
Yeah.
yes, we have to do the work on ourselves, but we need to experience another person that does see us for us to be able to feel seen.
Seen.
That I don't think we can do completely by ourselves.
Yeah. That makes sense. I had this I had this thought this morning that people are our mirrors and the world is more or less our projection. So what we're what we see in other people, whether it's I want to say someone is ugly or if I want to say someone's beautiful or this person is super intelligent or this one is person is not, what I'm doing is actually seeing my own self. I'm
Your
seeing my
own
own like
judgments, your own
yeah,
judgments
exact yeah,
about
yeah.
yourself. So
And
if,
then
somebody sees you, and says, "Oh, uh, that shirt, some shirt you're wearing," what is the kind of shirt that's appropriate? Like that, or I love your haircut, or I love this, or I hate that. It's like, well, what don't you hate? Like, it's all going to be a reflection of how they feel about themselves. I have a good friend who was in a very, very high end place in New York City with a Hawaiian shirt on. And somebody came up, this is back in the Armani days where everybody wore Armani. And this guy was like, wow, you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt in this fancy, and my friend knew, like, that was the man who had spent probably a lot of money on his Armani outfit, was jealous, and my friend was comfortable in his own Hawaiian shirt, you know?
sure.
But that is the man telling on himself that he thinks those clothes now make him enough.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean,
just notice if you have these judgments come up over anybody,
Yeah.
That is because you're seeing there's some part of yourself you haven't reconciled with,
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
right? Not
Yeah,
don't make yourself even wrong. Just notice, wow, I seem to really have a judgment about overweight people. Isn't that
I think that
fascinating?
I
Or a
I
poor person. Isn't that fascinating? Wonder where that comes from.
I mean, even on the flip side, if there's somebody that you quote unquote pedestalize or think is a genius, you're only recognizing your own inner genius, your own
Agreed.
like it goes both ways. And then I was like, God, then you think about how you see the world, right? Like whether it's a beautiful place or a chaotic place or whatever it
That's
is. And
right.
then, all of a sudden we flip to the markets and watch what, the markets are going on. If I think the market's a chaos or everything's chaotic, I'm going to go look and try and find the chaos
Yes.
that's happening.
But it could be that that chaos is what you knew in childhood. And that's also something I'm a big advocate of is having traders understand their attachment style because our attachment style gets set when we are infants with our primary caretaker, usually our mother. And if our mother wasn't, for whatever reasons, able to attune to us, we did grow up in chaos. We did grow up in anxiety or a sense of ambivalence. And so that becomes then the world isn't potentially safe. The world is out to get me because that
Sure.
was what you experienced as a child. So until that gets healed or addressed or tended to, met with compassion, we will have a tendency to see the glass half empty instead of half full because of that pain and wound. And that's why it's so important for us to just see that we have some wounds. Life is going to do that, it's inevitable. And to begin to not make those wounds wrong, but to begin to have compassion and discover how might I be able to help heal these wounds so that they don't get to hijack me, my vehicle, as often.
Yeah. God, yeah, I love it. Kim, we're approaching time here. I am full of gratitude. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm
Thank you
glad
for
that you were
having
able
me.
to. Um, where can people find you? Twitter, well, I suppose Twitter primarily.
I'm on Stocktwits too.
On Twitch
I
too?
have I
Yeah,
think
cool.
3 followers. You might be
Okay,
one of them. So I'm on Stocktwits, and of course, thewallstreetcoach.com is my website, and
okay.
Kim Ann Curtin is my handle on X, and as it
Awesome.
is on Stocktwits. Yeah, yeah.
Guys, honestly, like I can't speak highly enough.
Thanks.
Go give Kim a follow on Twitter and StockTwits. And I think that wraps up our time for today. Um, Nick here, obviously. We'll see you again next week. Ben and GP will be back. And yeah, trade them well. Let's see. I don't